He stumbled from the white wall of snow like death itself had spat him back, his lips blue and his fingers black with frost. "I forgot who I am," the child whispered through chattering teeth. The Yakama warrior had tracked elk for 3 days without rest, but when he heard that cry, he knew the hunt had changed. "From now on you survive as my son." The sound came first as nothing more than wind. A keening wail that threaded through the pine trees and across the frozen ridgeline where Timer Thundervoice crouched in the snow. He had been tracking the elk herd for the better part of 3 days, moving through the Cascade foothills with the patience his grandfather had beaten into him during those brutal winters when he was still young enough to question why silence mattered more than speed. The elk were close now. He could smell them on the air. That sharp musk of fear and grass, could see where their hooves had torn through the frozen crust just hours before. His bow was already strung, an arrow nocked and ready, his breath controlled to the point of invisibility. 3 days without a kill meant his people would go another week rationing what little dried meat remained from autumn. It meant children would cry themselves to sleep with empty bellies. It meant the elders would give up their portions and pretend they were not hungry. Timer had not missed a shot in 7 years. He would not miss today, but then the sound came again. Not wind this time, not the cry of a hawk, or the distant howl of wolves claiming territory. This was human, high and broken and desperate, like someone had been screaming for so long their voice had shattered into pieces. Timer froze, his hand tightened on the bow. The elk herd sensed something and scattered, their hooves drumming against frozen earth as they vanished into the thick timber below. 3 days of tracking gone in an instant. But Timer did not curse. He did not move. He listened. The cry came a third time, closer now, and with it came a sound that made his blood turn cold. The wet, rattling gasp of someone drowning on dry land. Someone dying. Timer rose from his crouch and turned toward the sound. He moved fast, despite the deep snow, his legs driving forward, in the efficient ground-eating stride his father had taught him before the fever took him 12 winters ago. His rifle stayed slung across his back. Whatever made that sound was not something you shot at. The trees grew thick here, ponderosa pine and Douglas fir so dense the snow beneath them was thinner, caught in the branches above like a frozen roof. Timer pushed through a wall of low-hanging boughs and stopped dead. 20 paces ahead, collapsed against the base of a lightning-struck pine, was a child. The boy could not have been more than 7 or 8 years old, though it was hard to tell beneath the layers of filth and frost. He wore no coat, just a thin cotton shirt that might have been white once, but was now brown with dried blood and black with soot. His feet were bare, the skin split open and weeping, toes curled inward like claws. His hands were worse. The fingers were swollen to twice their normal size, mottled purple and black, where the frostbite had set in deep. But it was his face that made Timer's chest tighten. The boy's lips were cracked and bleeding, his cheeks hollowed out from starvation, and his eyes, when they finally focused on Timer, held nothing. No fear, no hope. Just the blank, empty stare of someone who had already accepted death. Timer crossed the distance in 4 long strides. He dropped to one knee and reached for the boy's neck, pressing 2 fingers against the cold skin just below the jaw. The pulse was there, faint and irregular, but there. The boy's eyes tracked the movement, but he did not flinch, did not pull away. Timer had seen that look before, in captured animals who had fought the snare so long they no longer had the strength to care what came next. He pulled off his heavy buffalo hide coat and wrapped it around the boy's shoulders. The child made a sound, something between a whimper and a sigh, and his body began to shake. Not from cold this time, from something deeper. "What happened to you?" Timer said in English, his voice low and rough from days of silence. The boy's mouth opened. His lips moved, but no sound came out at first. Just a dry clicking in the back of his throat like bones rattling in a bag. Then, barely audible, he spoke. "I don't know." Timer leaned closer. "You don't know what happened?" The boy's head moved slightly, not quite a shake, not quite a nod. "I don't know my name. I don't know where I came from. I don't know who I am. His voice cracked on the last word, and tears began to stream down his frozen cheeks, cutting clean lines through the dirt. "I forgot who I am." Timer said nothing for a long moment. He had seen many things in his 32 years. He had seen men tortured by enemy tribes, their minds broken long before their bodies gave out. He had seen children stolen from their families and returned years later unable to speak their own language. He had seen what fear could do, what pain could erase. But this boy, this half-dead child with blackened fingers and empty eyes, carried something different. This was not the forgetting that came from trauma. This was the forgetting that came from something deliberate. Someone had done this to him. "Can you walk?" Timer asked. The boy tried. His legs buckled immediately, and he collapsed forward into the snow. Timer caught him before his face hit the ground and felt how light he was. Nothing but bone and skin stretched too thin. No more than 50 pounds. A strong wind would have carried him away. Timer stood, lifting the boy with him, and settled the child against his chest. The boy's head lolled against Timer's shoulder, and his breath came in short, shallow gasps that barely fogged the air. "We will not speak of names yet," Timer said quietly. "First we keep you alive. Then we find out who tried to kill you." The journey back to the winter camp took 3 hours, and by the time Timer emerged from the tree line into the clearing where his people had set their lodges, the boy had stopped shivering. That was not a good sign. When the body stopped fighting the cold, it meant the cold was winning. Timer moved quickly through the camp, ignoring the stares of the women grinding dried roots outside their lodges, ignoring the questions called out by the young men sharpening arrows near the central fire. He went straight to his own lodge, a sturdy structure of poles and hides that his mother had built with her own hands before she passed into the spirit world. He kicked aside the entrance flap and stepped into the warmth. Inside, the air was thick with smoke and the smell of burning sage. A small fire crackled in the center pit, casting dancing shadows across the interior walls. Timer laid the boy down on the pile of furs that served as his bed, and immediately began stripping away the ruined clothing. The shirt came off in pieces, stuck to the boy's skin with dried blood. Beneath it, Timer found the marks, dozens of them, thin, precise cuts running across the boy's back and chest in patterns that made no sense. Not random, not the work of an animal or a clumsy blade. These were deliberate, surgical. Someone had carved into this child with care. Timer's jaw tightened. He forced himself to breathe slowly, to push down the rage that threatened to cloud his thinking. Anger had no place here, not yet. He fetched a clay bowl from the corner and filled it with water from the skin hanging near the door, then set it near the fire to warm. While he waited, he examined the boy's hands and feet. The frostbite was severe. 2 fingers on the left hand were already lost, the tissue black and dead. 3 toes on the right foot would need to come off, or they would poison the blood. Timer had done this before. He knew what needed to happen. But first warmth, first water. First, bring the body back from the edge. He dipped a cloth into the warm water and began cleaning the wounds. The boy did not wake. His breathing stayed shallow and his skin stayed cold despite the fire. Timer worked in silence, his hands moving with the practiced efficiency of someone who had spent years learning the body's weaknesses and how to mend them. He cleaned the cuts, applied a paste made from willow bark and bear grease, and wrapped everything in soft deerskin. He elevated the boy's feet and hands, propping them on rolled furs to keep the blood from pooling. Then he covered the child in every blanket and hide he owned and sat back to wait. Hours passed. The fire burned low, and Timer fed it, kept it steady, kept the heat constant. Outside, the sounds of the camp faded as families settled into their lodges for the night. The wind picked up, howling through the trees, shaking the lodge walls. Snow began to fall again, heavy and thick, the kind that buried the world and made travel impossible. Timer watched the boy's chest rise and fall, counting each breath, willing it to continue. He had pulled men from frozen rivers who looked better than this. He had seen warriors survive wounds that should have killed them. But this boy, this nameless child with carved skin and blackened fingers, felt different, fragile, like he was held together by nothing more than will. And that will was fading fast. Around midnight, the boy's eyes opened. They stared at the smoke hole in the ceiling, tracking the sparks that drifted upward into the darkness. His lips moved again, forming words Timer could not hear. Timer leaned closer, his ear near the boy's mouth. The child spoke in a whisper so faint it was almost nothing. They said I had to forget. They said it was the only way to be pure. They said if I remembered I would burn. The boy's eyes shifted, finally focusing on Timer's face. Am I burning now? No, Timer said. You are safe. The boy blinked slowly. Safe. The word seemed foreign to him, like a language he no longer spoke. He tried to sit up and failed. Timer pressed a hand gently against his chest. Do not move. You are very hurt. The boy's gaze dropped to his hands, to the thick wrappings of deerskin that covered them. He stared for a long time. Then he looked back at Timer. Who are you? My name is Timer Thundervoice. I am Yakama. I found you in the snow. The boy processed this. Did you save me? I'm trying to, Timer said. The boy's eyes filled with tears again. Why? Because you were dying, Timer said simply. And I do not let things die when I can stop it. The boy shook his head slowly. You should have left me. They are looking for me. If they find me here, they will kill you too. Timer's expression did not change. Let them come. The boy stared at him, searching his face for something. Proof, maybe, or lies. He must have found neither, because after a moment he closed his eyes again. I do not remember my name, he whispered. I remember the cold. I remember running. I remember fire and men in black coats and a woman screaming. But I do not remember my name. Timer considered this. Then we will give you one. Until your memory returns, you will need something to answer to. The boy opened his eyes. What will you call me? Timer looked at the boy's blackened fingers, at the soot still embedded in his skin, at the way he had emerged from the blizzard like something burned and reborn. Flint, Timer said, because you are small and hard, and you create sparks even when the world tries to snuff you out. The boy, Flint now, stared at him. Then slowly he nodded. Flint, I can be Flint. Good, Timer said, now rest. Tomorrow, we will see if your body is strong enough to keep the fingers and toes you have left. Flint's eyes widened slightly. You are going to cut them off. The dead parts, yes. If I do not, the rot will spread and you will die anyway. Flint thought about this. Then he asked, will it hurt? Yes, Timer said, very much. But you will survive it. How do you know? Because I do not save someone just to let them die from infection. And because I think you have survived worse. Flint was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I think I have too. I just do not remember what. Timer fed more wood to the fire. The flames rose higher, casting warm light across the boy's pale face. Outside, the blizzard continued its assault on the world, burying everything in white. But inside the lodge, wrapped in furs and watched over by a warrior who had chosen to abandon his hunt, a nameless boy began the long, painful journey back from the edge of death. He did not know who he had been. He did not know who had hurt him or why. But for the first time in longer than he could remember, he was not alone. That night, Timer did not sleep. He sat by the fire, sharpening his knife, preparing for the surgery that would come with dawn. He thought about the marks on the boy's body, about the deliberate cruelty it took to carve a child like that. He thought about the fear in Flint's voice when he said they were looking for him, and he thought about what it meant to take responsibility for a life, to claim someone as your own when the world had tried to erase them. In his culture, adoption was sacred. To call someone your son was to bind your fate to theirs, to swear before the spirits that you would protect them even unto death. Timer had never had children, had never wanted the burden. But as he watched the small, broken boy sleep fitfully in his bed, he felt something shift inside him, something old and fierce and undeniable. When dawn came grey and cold, Timer heated his blade in the fire until it glowed red. He woke Flint gently and explained what needed to happen. The boy did not cry, did not beg. He just bit down on the piece of leather Timer gave him and nodded. The surgery took an hour. Flint screamed 3 times, the sound muffled by the leather, his small body arching against the pain. But when it was over, and the dead flesh was gone, and the wounds were sealed with hot metal and packed with herbs, he looked up at Timer with eyes that held something new. Not gratitude exactly, something harder. Respect. You did well, Timer said, wrapping the stumps carefully. Most grown men would have passed out. Flint's voice was hoarse. I think I have felt worse. I just cannot remember it. That is your mind protecting you, Timer said. Sometimes forgetting is a mercy. Flint looked at his wrapped hands, at the empty spaces where fingers used to be. And sometimes it is a prison. Timer met his gaze. Then we will find the key. Together. Over the next 3 days, Flint's fever broke and his color returned. He ate thin broth made from elk bone, then thicker stew, then finally solid meat. His strength came back slowly, painfully, but it came. Timer taught him how to move without using his damaged hands, how to balance despite the missing toes, how to exist in a body that had been altered by cruelty and survival. And Flint learned, not just how to move, but how to be still, how to watch and listen, how to read Timer's silences the way you read a trail in snow. The warrior did not waste words. When he spoke, it mattered. When he was silent, that mattered too. On the 4th day, Flint spoke his first full sentence without prompting. Why did you give up your hunt for me? Timer was mending a torn moccasin, his hands moving with careful precision. Because the elk will return, he said. But you would not have. Flint absorbed this. In my camp, people do not help strangers. They do not give up food for someone who cannot work. Timer looked up. Then your camp was run by cowards. Flint's eyes widened. You do not know what they were like. I do not need to, Timer said. Any man who values meat over a child's life is no man at all. He is a dog, and dogs do not lead. They follow or they die. Flint was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I think my camp had a lot of dogs. Timer tied off the sinew he had been using and set the moccasin aside. Tell me what you remember, not the big things, the small things. Flint closed his eyes. I remember wooden walls, high ones. And the smell of smoke, always smoke. I remember standing in lines, long lines, and a man with a silver cross around his neck. He would walk up and down the lines looking at us, choosing. His voice dropped. I remember being afraid of being chosen. What happened when you were chosen? Timer asked. Flint's hands, even wrapped and healing, clenched into fists. They took us to the room, the white room, and they made us kneel. And they said we were full of sin, that our memories were poison, that they were going to save us by burning out the bad parts. He opened his eyes, but they did not burn out the bad parts. They burned out everything, names, faces, homes, everything that made us who we were. And then they gave us numbers and told us we should be grateful. Timer felt his blood turn hot. How many children? Flint shook his head. I do not know. Dozens maybe, more. They kept bringing in new ones. Where is this place? I do not remember. I just remember running, fire, screaming, and then snow. So much snow. Timer stood and moved to the lodge entrance, looking out at the camp beyond. The sun was setting, painting the snow in shades of orange and red. He thought about the missions he had heard of, the places where white men took native children and erased them. But this sounded different, worse, more deliberate. He turned back to Flint. The marks on your body. Do you know what they mean? Flint touched his chest through the deerskin shirt Timer had given him. They called it the purification map. Each cut was a sin removed, a memory they did not want us to keep. Timer's jaw worked once, then stilled. Who did this? A man they called Father Grimm. He said he was saving souls. But I think he was collecting them. Timer returned to the fire and sat down across from Flint. He looked the boy in the eye. I'm going to tell you something now, and I need you to understand it completely. The boy nodded. From this moment forward, you are under my protection. Anyone who tries to take you will have to go through me first. And I promise you they will not. Flint's eyes filled with tears, but he did not let them fall. Why would you do that? You do not even know me. Timer reached across the fire and placed a hand on Flint's shoulder. Because I know enough. You are a fighter. You survived something that should have killed you. You ran when others gave up. And now you are here in my lodge, eating my food and wearing my clothes. In my culture, that makes you family. And family protects family. Always. Flint's voice came out as barely a whisper. Even if they come with guns. Even if they come with fire. Even if they come with God himself, Timer said. I do not abandon what is mine. From now on, you survive as my son. The words hung in the air between them, heavy and binding. Flint stared at Timer, this warrior who had given up his hunt, who had cut away dead flesh with steady hands, who had offered protection without asking for anything in return. And something inside the boy that had been shattered began, very slowly, to piece itself back together. That night, for the first time since Timer had found him, Flint slept without screaming. The morning Flint took his first steps outside the lodge, the world tried to kill him again. Not with blades or fire this time, but with memory. He stood at the entrance, one hand braced against the wooden frame, and stared at the endless expanse of white that stretched beyond the camp. His breath caught in his chest. His vision tunneled, and suddenly he was back in it, drowning in snow, his lungs burning, his body shutting down one piece at a time. Timer's hand landed firm on his shoulder, and the present snapped back into focus. "Breathe," the warrior said. "You are not there anymore." Flint sucked in air through his teeth. "I know, then why are you shaking?" "Because my body does not know yet." Timer studied him for a moment, then stepped past him into the cold. The camp was alive with morning activity. Women scraped hides stretched on wooden frames. Children chased each other between lodges, their laughter sharp and bright against the frozen air. Men worked on weapons, repaired snowshoes, hauled wood from the forest edge. No one stared at Flint directly, but he could feel their eyes sliding toward him when they thought he was not looking. The strange boy with the wrapped hands, the white child the warrior had claimed, the one who did not belong. Timer seemed to sense the weight of those stares because he spoke without turning around. "They wonder about you. That is natural. But wondering is not the same as threatening. You are safe here." Flint wanted to believe that. He stepped outside. The cold hit him like a fist, but it was different now. He had layers. Thick deerskin clothing Timer had modified to fit his smaller frame. Fur-lined moccasins that protected what remained of his feet. A wool blanket draped over his shoulders like a cape. He was not the half-dead thing Timer had pulled from the snow. He was something else now, still broken maybe, but mending. Timer led him through the camp toward the eastern edge, where the trees grew thick and the ground sloped upward into rocky hills. Other warriors nodded as they passed. A few spoke in Yakama, words Flint did not understand, but that sounded like greetings or acknowledgments. Timer answered them in the same language, his tone easy and relaxed. Flint tried to match his stride, but his missing toes made balance difficult. He stumbled twice before they reached the tree line. Timer did not help him up, just waited until Flint found his feet again. They climbed for an hour. Not far, maybe half a mile, but the terrain was brutal. Loose rocks hidden beneath snow. Fallen logs slick with ice. Sections where the slope was so steep, Flint had to use his elbows and knees because his hands could not grip properly. Timer moved ahead like the mountain itself had carved a path just for him, never slipping, never hesitating. Flint followed and said nothing, even when his lungs screamed and his legs threatened to give out. Complaining felt like weakness. Weakness felt like death. Finally, Timer stopped at a flat outcropping of stone that overlooked the valley below. He sat down and motioned for Flint to do the same. The boy collapsed beside him, his chest heaving, sweat freezing on his face despite the cold. Timer handed him a water skin. "Drink slowly." Flint obeyed. The water was ice-cold and tasted like minerals. When he finished, Timer took the skin back and pointed down at the camp far below. "Tell me what you see," Timer said. Flint wiped his mouth on his sleeve. "I see lodges, people, smoke from fires." Timer shook his head. "Look harder. Not with your eyes. With your mind. What do you see?" Flint frowned and looked again. The camp was arranged in a loose circle, with the central fire pit at its heart. The lodges varied in size, but all faced east. Paths between them were well worn, packed down by countless feet. Woodpiles sat near every entrance. Racks of drying meat stood in clusters. A few horses grazed in a roped-off area on the southern side. Children played in the spaces between, always within sight of adults. He spoke slowly, working it out as he went. I see order. Everyone has a place. Everyone has work. Nothing is wasted. Timer nodded. What else? Flint thought. I see safety. The lodges are close enough that if one family has trouble, others can help, but far enough apart that fire would not spread. Good, Timer said. And what do you not see? Flint scanned the camp again. Then it hit him. I do not see walls. No fences, no guards. Timer's expression did not change, but something in his eyes sharpened. And why do you think that is? Because you do not need them, Flint said. You are not afraid. We are always afraid, Timer corrected. Fear keeps you alive, but we do not let fear make us prisoners. Walls do not stop determined men. They only make you believe you are safe when you are not. Real safety comes from awareness, from knowing the land, from trusting the people around you. He looked at Flint. In your old place were there walls? Yes, Flint whispered. High ones, made of wood, with men who walked the top carrying guns. And did those walls keep you safe? Flint's throat tightened. No, they kept us trapped. Timer let the silence sit for a moment. Then he stood and brushed snow from his leggings. Come, today you learn to see the way a warrior sees. They spent the rest of the morning moving through the forest, while Timer pointed out signs Flint would have missed on his own. A broken branch here meant deer had passed through. Scat there, still steaming, meant elk were close. Scratches on tree bark indicated a bear had marked territory. Bird calls changed pitch when predators approached. Even the wind told stories if you knew how to listen. Timer did not explain things twice. He would point, name what Flint was looking at, and move on. The boy had to keep up or be left behind. It was brutal teaching, but it was effective. By midday, Flint could spot a rabbit trail without being told. Could hear the difference between a raven's alarm call and its hunting call. Could tell which trees would give good firewood and which would smoke too much. They stopped to rest near a frozen creek. Timer broke through the ice with the butt of his knife and filled the water skin with fresh flowing water beneath. Flint watched the process carefully, memorizing each step. When Timer finished, he looked at the boy. Why do you watch everything I do? Because I do not want to be useless, Flint said. Timer tilted his head. You think you are useless now? I cannot hunt. I cannot fight. I can barely walk without falling. What use am I? Timer was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, after your surgery, when I was removing the dead flesh from your hand, you did not pass out. Most grown warriors would have, but you stayed awake the entire time. Why? Flint shrugged. Because if I passed out, I might not wake up. And you wanted to wake up, yes. Why? The question caught Flint off guard. He opened his mouth, but no answer came immediately. He thought about it, really thought, reaching back through the fog of his broken memory. Finally he said, because I was angry. At what? At them. At the men in black coats. At Father Grimm. At everyone who took pieces of me and said it was for my own good. Flint's voice grew stronger. I stayed awake because I wanted to remember the pain. I wanted to know what surviving felt like, so that when they come for me again, I will know I can do it twice. Timer nodded slowly. That is not uselessness. That is will. And will is the most dangerous weapon any warrior can carry. Flint looked at him. More dangerous than a rifle. Timer stood. A rifle runs out of bullets. Will does not. That afternoon, Timer began teaching Flint how to move through the world with a body that had been altered. How to balance on 7 toes instead of 10. How to grip with 3 fingers and a thumb on one hand, 4 on the other. How to use his elbows and forearms as leverage when his palms could not press flat. It was frustrating work. Flint fell constantly. His wrapped hands throbbed. His feet ached in ways that made him want to scream. But Timer did not let him stop. Every time Flint hit the ground, the warrior would say the same thing. Get up, no comfort, no sympathy, just the command. And Flint would get up. Again and again and again. By the time the sun started to sink toward the western mountains, Flint could walk 100 paces without stumbling, could pick up a stone with his damaged hands, could kneel and rise without using his arms for balance. Small victories, but they felt enormous. They returned to camp as the evening fires were being lit. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Timer led Flint not to their lodge, but to the central fire where the elders gathered. 3 men and 2 women, all with hair gone white and faces carved deep with the lines of long lives. They looked up as Timer approached. One of the men, rail-thin with eyes like black stones, spoke in Yakama. Timer answered in the same language. The conversation went back for several exchanges. Flint stood beside the warrior, understanding nothing but feeling the weight of the moment. Finally, the elder switched to English and addressed Flint directly. "You are the boy my grandson pulled from the snow." "Yes, sir," Flint said. The elder studied him. "You have no people. Not anymore, no family. Not that I remember, no tribe." "No." Timer cut in, his voice firm. "He has me." The elder's gaze shifted to Timer. "You claim him?" "I do, as your son, as my son." The silence that followed felt like a living thing. The other elders exchanged glances. One of the women leaned forward. "Do you understand what you are doing?" Timer thunder voice. "Claiming a white child in these times. The soldiers already watch us with suspicion. Taking in one of their own will bring questions we may not want to answer." "He is not theirs," Timer said flatly. "He is mine, and I do not care what questions come." The elder woman's expression softened slightly. She looked at Flint. "Boy, do you accept this? Do you accept Timer Thunder Voice as your father and our people as your people?" Flint's heart hammered in his chest. He thought about Father Grimm and the White Room, about the men in black coats who had carved forgetting into his skin, about the place with high walls where children were erased and told to be grateful. Then he looked at Timer, who had given up his hunt and cut away dead flesh and taught him how to stand again. "Yes," Flint said. "I accept." The thin elder nodded once. "Then it is done. The boy called Flint is now Yakama. He is under our protection. And anyone who harms him harms us all." He switched back to Yakama and said something else. The other elders murmured agreement. Then they returned to their conversation as if Flint and Timer were no longer there. The warrior placed a hand on Flint's shoulder and guided him away from the fire. They walked in silence back to the lodge. Once inside, Timer fed the fire and set a pot of stew to warm. Flint sat on the furs, his mind spinning. "What just happened?" he asked. "You were adopted," Timer said simply. "By one person or by everyone? Both. In our way, when a warrior claims someone, the whole tribe accepts that claim unless there is good reason not to." The elders saw no reason. "So now you belong." Flint looked at his wrapped hands. "Just like that. Just like that." But Timer's expression grew serious. "Understand something, Flint? This is not charity. This is responsibility. You are Yakama now. That means you carry our ways. You learn our language. You contribute to the tribe. You defend your people when defense is needed. And if enemies come, you stand with us even if it costs your life. Can you do that?" Flint met his eyes. "I can. You are certain. Because there is no going back once this is done. If you run, if you betray us, if you prove yourself false, the shame will follow you forever." Flint's voice did not waver. "I have nowhere to run to, no one waiting for me, no memory of who I was before they broke me. This is the first place I have felt like a person instead of a number. So yes, I'm certain." Timer searched his face for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Good. Tomorrow your real training begins." That night Flint lay awake long after Timer had fallen asleep. He stared at the smoke drifting through the lodge's peak and thought about names. He had been a number once, 47. Then he had been no one. A blank space where a person should be. Then Timer had called him Flint, and suddenly he was something again. Small and hard and capable of creating sparks. Now he was Yakama. He belonged to a people, a place, a warrior who had sworn to protect him. It felt strange. Heavy, like wearing clothes that did not quite fit but that you knew you would grow into. He flexed his damaged hands beneath the blankets. 3 fingers and a thumb on the left, 4 on the right, 7 toes between both feet. His body was a map of survival, each missing piece a testament to how close he had come to vanishing completely. But he had not vanished. He had crawled out of the snow and into the warmth of a lodge where a warrior with thunder in his name had decided one child was worth more than meat for the winter. Flint did not understand that kind of choice, did not understand why Taima had done it. But he was grateful. More than grateful. He was determined. Determined to prove the choice had been right. Determined to become someone worthy of the name he had been given. Determined to survive long enough to remember who had tried to erase him. And then, when the time came, determined to make sure they could never erase anyone else. He thought about Father Grimm and the White Room. About the other children who might still be there, kneeling in lines, waiting to be chosen, waiting to be carved empty. He thought about the men in black coats and their talk of purification and salvation. But how they smiled while they destroyed. Rage, quiet and cold, settled in his chest like a second heartbeat. He did not have a rifle yet, did not have the strength to fight. But he would. Taima had said will was the most dangerous weapon. Flint had will. He had survived when survival should have been impossible. Had stayed conscious through agony because unconsciousness felt like surrender. Had dragged himself through a blizzard with blackened fingers and no memory of his own name because something inside him refused to die. That something was still there, growing stronger with every lesson, every fall and rise. Every moment he proved to himself that he was more than what they had tried to make him. He closed his eyes and made a promise to the darkness. I will remember, and when I do, I will burn that place to the ground. The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Taima woke Flint before dawn each morning and they would train. Not fighting yet. Flint's body was not ready for that. But movement, balance, awareness. Taima taught him how to walk without sound, how to control his breathing until it was nearly silent, how to read the forest by touch and smell when vision failed. He taught him the Yakama words for basic things: fire, water, food, danger, run, hide, fight. Flint absorbed it all with the intensity of someone who knew education was survival. In the afternoons, the other members of the tribe began including him in their work. The women showed him how to scrape hides, how to sew with sinew despite his missing fingers, how to identify which plants could be eaten and which would kill. The men let him watch as they crafted arrows, repaired weapons, planned hunts. The children, after initial wariness, started treating him like one of them. They taught him games, pulled him into their play, laughed when he fell and helped him back up. Flint learned their names. Kasa, the girl with braids who could outrun anyone. Ekan, the boy who climbed trees like a squirrel. Eyita, the youngest, barely 4, who followed Flint everywhere and called him brother. He learned the rhythms of the camp, when to gather wood, when to haul water, when to stay quiet because the elders were speaking, when to laugh because joy was just as important as work. He learned that belonging was not something given. It was something built, one small action at a time, until the structure was strong enough to hold you even when you stumbled. And he learned that Taima Thundervoice was more than just the warrior who had saved him. He was a man the tribe respected deeply. When he spoke, people listened. When he moved, they made room, not out of fear but out of recognition. This was someone who had earned his place through action, not words. 3 weeks after the adoption, Flint woke to find Taima sharpening a knife by the fire, not the big hunting knife he usually carried. This one was smaller, the blade only 4 inches long, the handle wrapped in leather. Taima tested the edge against his thumb, nodded, and held it out to Flint. This is yours now. Flint took it carefully. The weight felt perfect in his hand, despite the missing fingers. What is it for? Everything, Taima said. Cutting food, carving wood, defending yourself if words fail. A knife is the most honest tool a man can carry. It does exactly what you tell it to. Nothing more, nothing less. He stood. Today you learn how to use it without killing yourself. They spent the morning in the forest. Taima showed Flint how to grip the knife for different tasks, how to cut rope without sawing, how to skin a rabbit in 3 quick motions, how to sharpen the blade on a stone until it could split a hair, and finally, how to hold it like a weapon. The stance was different than Flint expected, low, blade reversed, edge out. Timer moved through the forms slowly so Flint could follow. Thrust, slash, parry, retreat. Each movement precise and economical. No wasted motion. No dramatic flourishes, just efficiency. You do not swing a knife like an axe, Timer explained. You do not stab wildly and hope. You move with intention. You target soft places, throat, belly, inner thigh where the big vein runs. One good cut is worth more than a dozen bad ones. Flint practiced the forms until his arms burned. Timer corrected his grip, adjusted his stance, made him repeat sequences until they became automatic. Hours passed. The sun climbed and fell. Flint's hands cramped and his shoulders screamed, but he did not stop. Finally, as the light began to fade, Timer called a halt. Enough, you have the basics. Flint lowered the knife, his chest heaving. When will I be good enough to actually fight? Timer's expression was unreadable. When you stop thinking of it as fighting and start thinking of it as surviving. Fighting is about winning. Surviving is about making sure the other person loses. There is a difference. Flint thought about that. Then he asked the question that had been growing in his mind for weeks. When they come for me, will you let me fight? Timer looked at him for a long moment. If they come and you run, I will not think less of you. Running is smart when you are outmatched. But if you choose to stand, then yes, I will let you fight. Because a warrior who is not allowed to defend himself is not a warrior. He is a victim, and you are not a victim anymore. Flint's grip tightened on the knife. No, I am not. Then prove it, Timer said. Every day, with every choice. Until the day comes when you do not have to prove it anymore because everyone already knows. They walked back to camp in the gathering dark. Flint kept the knife tucked into his belt where he could reach it quickly. It was a small thing. 4 inches of steel and a leather-wrapped handle. But it felt like a promise. A statement. I'm armed now. I am dangerous now. I am someone who can hurt back. That night, for the first time since Timer had found him half dead in the snow, Flint smiled before he fell asleep. Not because he was happy, but because he was becoming something the men in black coats had not planned for. He was becoming a weapon they had forged by accident, and one day soon he would make sure they regretted it. The stranger appeared on a Tuesday morning, when the fog was thick enough to hide sins. Flint saw him first from the ridge above camp, where he had gone to practice the throwing techniques Timer had taught him the day before. The man was not trying to hide exactly, but he moved with the careful deliberation of someone who understood that being seen meant being questioned. He wore a long black coat despite the cold, the kind missionaries favored, and he carried no visible weapons, though Flint knew that meant nothing. The man stopped at the forest edge and stood there watching the camp below like he was counting something. Counting lodges, maybe, or people, or ways in and out. Flint's hand went to the knife at his belt, and he moved back into the shadow of a boulder before the man could spot him. Then he turned and ran. He found Timer near the horse pen, repairing a section of rope fence that had come loose during the night. The warrior looked up as Flint approached, read the tension in the boy's posture, and set down his work without a word. What? A man, Flint said quietly. North Ridge. Black coat. Watching the camp, Timer's expression did not change, but his hand moved to check the rifle, leaning against the fence post. How long? Maybe 5 minutes before I came down. He is still there, alone, I think so. But I did not get close enough to be sure. Timer nodded once. Show me. They moved through the camp quickly but without running. Running attracted attention, and attention meant questions, and questions meant panic. Better to move with purpose, like 2 people going to check traps or scout game. Nothing unusual. Nothing worth watching. Other tribe members glanced at them, but no one called out. By the time they reached the northern tree line, Flint had his breathing under control and his knife loose in its sheath. They climbed in silence. Timer moved like smoke through the forest, each step placed with absolute certainty, never breaking a branch or disturbing snow in ways that would be visible from a distance. Flint followed, mimicking the warrior's movements as best he could with his damaged feet. His balance had improved over the weeks, but he still stumbled occasionally, still had to think about weight distribution in ways that used to be automatic. When they reached the ridge, Timer held up one hand. Flint stopped. The warrior crept forward to the boulder where Flint had hidden earlier and peered around it. The man in the black coat was gone. Timer scanned the area methodically, his eyes moving in a grid pattern, checking every shadow, every cluster of trees, every place a person could conceal themselves. Nothing. He motioned Flint forward. The boy joined him, and they both studied the spot where the stranger had stood. Boot prints, deep ones. The man had been standing in the same place for a long time, long enough for his weight to compress the snow down to frozen earth. Timer knelt and examined the prints closely. Size 11, maybe 12. Heavy, either a large man or one carrying significant weight. He moved along the trail, following the prints back into the forest. Flint stayed close, his heart hammering in his chest. The tracks led east for about 200 yards before they reached a small clearing where the snow had been disturbed in a circle. The man had paced here, waiting for something, or deciding something. Timer crouched again and picked up an object from the snow. A spent match, still faintly warm. He held it up for Flint to see. Then he pointed to another spot where ash had been scattered. Someone burned something. Paper, maybe. Flint's throat went dry. A letter, or a map. Timer stood and continued following the tracks. They led another half-mile through increasingly rough terrain before they reached a game trail that ran along a frozen creek. Here the tracks met others. 2 more sets of boots, smaller. Both men, Timer said quietly. Probably hired guns. Not settlers. The gait is wrong. Too measured. These are men who move for a living. Flint looked at the overlapping prints. How can you tell? Because settlers walk like they are always tired. These men walk like they are always hunting. There is a difference. He straightened. They came from the east, met our friend in the black coat, talked. Then all 3 headed west. Timer pointed along the creek, away from the camp. Flint felt a small surge of relief. So they are leaving. Timer's expression was grim. No, they are circling, coming at us from a different direction. Probably trying to find an approach that does not require them to cross open ground. They followed the tracks for another 20 minutes, until they lost them in a rocky section where the snow was too thin to hold prints. Timer studied the terrain, his jaw working. They will be back. Probably tonight, maybe tomorrow. Flint's hand tightened on his knife. What do? We prepare, and we make sure every member of the tribe knows what is coming. They returned to camp, and Timer immediately went to the elders. Flint was not invited to that conversation, but he watched from a distance as the warrior spoke, and the old men and women listened with expressions that grew harder with each sentence. One of the elders, the thin man with black stone eyes, asked a question. Timer answered and gestured toward Flint. Every head turned to look at the boy. Flint forced himself to stand straight, to meet their gazes without flinching. After a long moment, the elder nodded and spoke again. Timer bowed slightly and walked back to Flint. What did they say? Flint asked. That we double the night watch, that all weapons are to be kept close, that children are not to leave the camp perimeter without an adult, and that you are to stay in our lodge after dark until this is resolved. Flint bristled. I can fight. I know you can. But you are also the reason they are here. If they take you, everything we have done means nothing. Flint wanted to argue, but he knew Timer was right. He nodded reluctantly. The warrior put a hand on his shoulder. This is not punishment. This is strategy. You do not win by being brave. You win by being smart. And smart means protecting your weaknesses so they cannot be exploited. Flint absorbed that. Then what is our strength? Timer's smile was sharp and cold. We know this land. They do not. We know where to stand and where to run. They do not. And we know how to make 3 men feel like 30 when the night is dark and the wind is howling. They most certainly do not. That afternoon, Taima gathered the warriors and they made plans. Flint was allowed to listen but not contribute. He sat near the fire and absorbed every word. They would set up false camps in 3 directions to confuse anyone trying to scout their position. They would lay traps along the most obvious approach routes, snares that would tangle legs, pits covered with branches that would snap under weight, Drip lines attached to bells that would sound if disturbed. They would keep the central fire burning high to draw attention, while most of the tribe moved to shelters they had built deeper in the forest for exactly this kind of situation. And they would rotate guards in shifts so that no one was watching for more than 2 hours at a time, because tired eyes missed things that rested eyes caught. It was a defensive plan, born from generations of surviving in a world that did not want them to exist. Flint marveled at the efficiency of it, how quickly the tribe moved from peace to preparation, how little panic there was, just grim determination and the understanding that this was not the first time and would not be the last. As the sun began to set, families started moving into the forest. They took only what they could carry: food, blankets, weapons. Everything else was left behind or hidden. Flint helped where he could, carrying bundles for the women, keeping the younger children calm by telling them stories about clever rabbits who outsmarted hungry wolves. The children listened with wide eyes and did not cry, even though Flint could see the fear in their faces. They had been taught young that silence was survival. By the time full dark arrived, the camp looked almost normal from a distance. Lodges still stood, the central fire still burned, but if you looked closely, you would see that no smoke rose from most of the lodge peaks. No shadows moved inside the skins. The camp was a shell, a decoy, and in the forest beyond, 60 members of the Yakama tribe waited in absolute silence. Taima positioned himself and Flint in a shelter built into the base of a massive cedar tree. The space was barely large enough for 2 people, but it was warm and well concealed. From here, they had a clear view of the camp and the northern approach. Taima loaded his rifle and set it across his lap. Then he pulled out his pistol, checked the cylinder, and handed it to Flint. The boy took it with shaking hands. "I have never fired a gun, I know. That is why you are only going to fire it if someone gets past me and comes through that opening." He pointed at the narrow entrance to their shelter. "If that happens, you point at their chest and you pull the trigger until it stops clicking. Do you understand?" Flint nodded. His mouth was too dry to speak. Taima studied him for a moment. "You are afraid, yes, good. Fear keeps you sharp, but do not let it freeze you. If the moment comes, you act. You do not think. You do not hesitate. You just act. Can you do that?" Flint met his eyes. "I can." Taima nodded and turned back to watch the camp. They waited. Minutes stretched into hours. The moon rose, nearly full, casting everything in silver and shadow. The wind picked up, making the trees creak and groan. Flint's hands ached from gripping the pistol too tight. He forced himself to relax his fingers, to breathe slowly, to stay present. Around them the forest was alive with sound. Owls hooted. Small animals rustled through underbrush. Once a wolf howled in the distance and was answered by another closer by. Normal sounds, natural sounds. But beneath it all, Flint listened for the sounds that did not belong. The snap of a branch under a careless boot. The metallic click of a gun being cocked. The whisper of men who thought they were being quiet but were not. And then, just after midnight, he heard it. Voices, faint but distinct. Coming from the east, Taima heard them too. His posture changed, became utterly still in the way predators go still before they strike. He brought the rifle up slowly, resting the barrel on a notch in the tree root. Flint leaned forward, trying to see. At first there was nothing, just darkness and trees and shifting shadows. Then movement. 3 figures emerging from the forest, making their way toward the camp with weapons drawn. The man in the black coat was in the lead. Behind him came the 2 others Taima had described. Hired guns with the loose, confident walk of men who had done this before. They moved into the camp and stopped at the central fire. The man in the black coat looked around, his head turning slowly as he studied the lodges. He called out. His voice carried clearly in the cold air. "We know the boy is here. We tracked him. We just want to talk. No one needs to get hurt. We are from the mission of Blessed Reformation. The child belongs to us. He is confused, damaged. He needs proper care. Christian care. You are harboring stolen property." Flint's blood turned to ice. Blessed Reformation. The name punched through the fog in his memory, and suddenly he was back in the White Room, kneeling in a line with other children. Father Grimm, walking past with his silver cross and his soft voice, choosing who would be purified next. The smell of burning flesh as the heated blade cut symbols into skin, the tank filling with salt water as they lowered him in, the electrodes attached to his temples, the voice in his ear saying forget, 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 as electricity turned his thoughts to static. He gasped, the sound loud in the confined space. Timer's hand shot out and gripped his arm hard enough to hurt. "Flint, stay with me. Do not go back there. Stay here, stay now." Flint forced his eyes to focus, forced his breathing to slow. Timer's face was close to his, serious and steady. "I'm here," Flint whispered. "I'm here, good, now watch." The man in the black coat called out again. "We can do this easy or hard. Your choice. Give us the boy and we leave. Keep him and we take him anyway. And anyone who tries to stop us will learn why the Lord's work requires hard men to do it." Still no response from the camp. The man gestured to his companions. They fanned out, moving toward the lodges. One kicked open the entrance to the nearest shelter, gun raised. Empty. He moved to the next. Also empty. The third, empty. The man in the black coat stopped. His posture changed. He spun in a slow circle, scanning the darkness beyond the firelight. Then he started laughing. It was a cold, ugly sound. "You think you are clever, hiding in the woods like animals. But we are patient men. We will wait. We will burn every lodge if we have to. Smoke you out like rats." He pulled something from his coat, a flask. He uncorked it and splashed liquid across the nearest lodge. The smell of kerosene hit the air. Then he pulled out a match. The shot cracked across the clearing like thunder. The flask exploded in the man's hand. He screamed and dropped it, kerosene spraying across his coat. The other two men spun toward the sound, but could not locate the source. Another shot. The dirt kicked up between their feet. Timer's voice rang out from the darkness, cold and hard as iron. "The next one will not miss. Leave now or I will put bullets in all three of you." The man in the black coat clutched his bleeding hand. His face was twisted with rage. "You cannot protect him forever. We will come back. With more men. With soldiers if we have to. That boy is ours. He was given to the mission legally. His mother signed the papers before she died." Flint's heart seized. Mother, signed papers, dead. The words hit him like physical blows. Timer spoke again. "I do not care what papers you have. He is mine now. And if you come back, you will not leave. That is not a threat. That is a promise." The two hired guns looked at each other, then at their employer. One of them spoke low enough that Flint barely caught it. "This is not worth dying over." The man in the black coat snarled. "We were paid. We finished the job." The hired gun shook his head. "You were paid. We were hired. There is a difference. And we do not get paid enough to fight ghosts in the dark." Both men turned and walked back toward the tree line. The man in the black coat stood alone, his hand dripping blood onto the snow. He looked around one more time. Then he pointed at the forest, where he thought Timer was hiding. "This is not over," he shouted. "The mission will not forget. We will file complaints with the territorial governor, with the army. We will see you removed from this land. And when you are gone, we will find that boy." He turned and limped after his companions. They waited in the shelter for another hour to make sure the men were truly gone. Then Timer stood and helped Flint to his feet. The boy's legs were shaking so badly he nearly collapsed. Timer caught him. "Breathe. It is over." For now, Flint looked up at him. "He said my mother was dead. He said she signed papers." Timer's face was grim. "He said many things. Some might be true. Some might be lies meant to hurt you. Right now we do not know which is which." Flint's voice cracked. "I need to know. I need to remember." "I know," Timer said quietly, "and we will help you. But first we make sure the tribe is safe. Then we hunt for your truth." Flint nodded. They emerged from the shelter and Timer gave a specific bird call. 3 sharp notes. Safe to return. Within minutes, the forest came alive with movement as families made their way back to camp. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us now. Back to the story. The elders gathered at the central fire. The thin man spoke to Timer in Yakama for several minutes. Then he switched to English and addressed Flint directly. "The men who came tonight will return, and they will bring others. This puts the tribe in danger. Some will say you are not worth that danger, that we should give you back and avoid the trouble." Flint felt his stomach drop. The elder continued, "I'm not one of those people. You are Yakama now. We do not abandon our own. But you must understand the cost. If we keep you, we may have to leave this place. Find new ground, and winter is not the time to move a tribe." Flint swallowed hard. "I understand, and if it comes to that, I will leave on my own. I will not let you suffer for me." The elder tilted his head. "You would walk back into their hands to save us." "Yes." The elder looked at Timer. "Your son has honor." Timer's hand rested on Flint's shoulder. "He learned it from his people." The elder nodded slowly. "Then we have time to decide. For now, we double the watch, and we send word to the other bands. Let them know what is happening. If the mission brings soldiers, we will need allies." He looked back at Flint. "And you, boy, you will train harder, because if they come again, you will need to be able to fight. Not just survive, fight. Can you do that?" Flint thought about the White Room, about Father Grimm's smile, about the other children who were still there, still being carved and erased. He thought about his mother, whose face he could not remember, but whose death he now knew was real. And he thought about the rage that had been building in his chest since the day Timer had pulled him from the snow. "Yes," he said, "I can fight." That night Flint did not sleep. He sat by the fire in Timer's lodge and stared at the flames while his mind raced. Mother, dead. Papers signed. Mission of Blessed Reformation. The fragments were coming together, but they still did not form a complete picture. He could remember pieces now. A woman's voice singing. The smell of bread baking. A small house with yellow curtains. But when he tried to see her face, it was just a blur. Like someone had taken an eraser to that part of his memory and scrubbed until nothing remained. Timer sat across from him, cleaning his rifle in silence. Finally he spoke. "You are thinking too hard." Flint looked up. "How do you stop thinking about something?" "You do not. You just think about something else. Something you can control." Flint frowned. "Like what?" "Like who you want to become. The past is broken pieces. You can pick them up and try to put them back together. But even if you succeed, the cracks will still show. Or you can use those pieces to build something new, something stronger." Flint absorbed that. "What if I need to remember, to know what happened?" "Then you will, when you are ready. But do not let the search for yesterday keep you from becoming who you need to be tomorrow." Flint was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked, "What do you think happened to my mother?" Timer set down the rifle. "I think she was desperate. I think she was sick or poor or afraid. And I think men like Father Grimm prey on desperate people. They offer salvation. They offer to take the burden off your shoulders. They make it sound like mercy. And by the time you realize what you have given away, it is too late." "Do you think she wanted to get rid of me?" "No," Timer said firmly. "I think she thought she was saving you. And I think when she realized her mistake, she tried to get you back. And I think they killed her for it." Flint's hands clenched into fists. "How do you know? I do not. But I know men like them, and I know what they do to people who threaten their work." Flint stared into the fire. The flames twisted and danced, casting shadows that looked almost alive. He thought about vengeance, about riding to the mission and burning it to the ground the way they had tried to burn the camp, about making Father Grimm kneel and beg the way he had made children kneel, about carving purification into his flesh and asking how it felt. The thoughts were dark and seductive, and they filled him with a heat that had nothing to do with the fire. Timer seemed to sense the direction of his mind because he spoke again. "Revenge is a poison. It feels good going down, but it eats you from the inside." Flint looked at him. "So I just let them go. Let them keep doing what they do." "I did not say that. But if you go after them now, with rage in your heart and tears in your eyes, you will fail, and you will die, and they will win." Timer leaned forward. "If you want justice, you have to be cold. You have to be patient. You have to be smarter and harder and more ruthless than they are. And that takes time. So you train, you learn, you become the weapon that can actually hurt them. And when you are ready, when you are sharp enough and strong enough, then you strike. Not before. Flint nodded slowly. He understood. The rage was still there, burning in his chest like a coal. But Timer was right. Fire without control just burned everything, including yourself. He needed to be more than angry. He needed to be dangerous. And that meant work. Hard, patient, brutal work. He met Timer's eyes. Teach me everything. Everything you know. How to track. How to fight. How to kill if I have to. Teach me how to be the thing they should have feared. Timer held his gaze for a long moment. Then he nodded. I will. But understand this. Once you start down that path, there is no going back. You will not be a child anymore. You will be a warrior. And warriors carry weight that never leaves. Are you ready for that? Flint did not hesitate. Yes. Then tomorrow, Timer said, your real education begins. The training changed everything. Timer woke Flint 2 hours before dawn, and they moved into the forest while the rest of the camp still slept. No longer was it about learning to walk or balance or see. This was about becoming efficient, about turning the body into something that could hurt without hesitation. Timer started with hand-to-hand combat, teaching Flint how to fight with missing fingers and damaged feet, how to use elbows like hammers, how to turn disadvantage into surprise. A man expects you to punch with a closed fist, Timer explained, while demonstrating a strike. When you cannot make a proper fist, you drive the heel of your palm into his nose, or you rake what fingers you have across his eyes. There is no honor in survival, only results. Flint practiced until his arms felt like dead weight, until sweat froze on his face, until the movements became automatic, but combat training was only part of it. Timer also taught him how to disappear, how to move through a forest in daylight and leave no trace, how to control your breathing so your breath did not fog in cold air, how to use terrain, shadow, and misdirection to become invisible even when people were looking directly at you. After 3 weeks, Flint could find Timer's hiding spots in under 20 minutes. The warrior nodded approval and said nothing. The next day, he made it harder. Winter deepened. The tribe moved through the season with grim efficiency. They rationed food carefully, repaired clothing constantly, kept fires burning low to conserve wood. Flint threw himself into the work of survival alongside everyone else. He hauled water from the creek even when the buckets made his damaged hands scream. He chopped kindling even when his arms shook with exhaustion. The other tribe members noticed. They stopped looking at him like he was an outsider, started including him in conversations without translating everything to English. He was becoming Yakama, not just in name, but in fact. 6 weeks after the confrontation with the mission men, a trader came through the territory. He brought news. The Mission of Blessed Reformation had filed formal complaints with the governor. They claimed the Yakama were harboring a kidnapped child. The governor had dispatched a cavalry unit to investigate. 20 soldiers, led by a captain named Hollis, who had a reputation for efficiency and brutality. They were expected to arrive within 2 weeks. The elders called a council. When they emerged, the thin elder with black stone eyes approached Flint directly. The tribe has decided. We will not give you to the soldiers, but we also will not fight them. Not yet. Instead, we will move. Find new winter ground deeper in the mountains where they cannot follow easily. This will be hard. Some may not survive the journey, but it is better than war. Flint felt his throat tighten. You are leaving because of me. We are leaving because staying means choosing between surrender and slaughter. Neither is acceptable. The elder put a hand on his shoulder. Do not carry guilt for the choices of evil men. They began preparations immediately. They worked through the night, dismantling lodges, bundling supplies, preparing the horses for the journey ahead. By dawn, they were ready. 63 people, 11 horses, and everything they owned reduced to bundles and baskets. They moved south, following game trails and frozen rivers deeper into the Cascade Range. The terrain was brutal, steep climbs that left everyone gasping, narrow passes where one wrong step meant a fall that would kill. On the 3rd day, they reached a valley Timer knew. It was sheltered on 3 sides by cliffs, with only one narrow entrance that could be easily defended. The tribe set up camp quickly. By nightfall, they had fire and shelter. They had bought themselves time. Flint continued his training, but now it had urgency. Timer taught him how to shoot, first with the pistol at close range, then with a rifle at distance. Flint's damaged hands made it difficult, but Timer showed him modifications, how to brace the stock differently, how to compensate through positioning and patience. Flint fired hundreds of rounds over 2 weeks. At 50 yards, he could hit a target the size of a man's chest 4 times out of 5. Not great, but enough to be dangerous. 3 weeks after they arrived, a rider came from another Yakama band. He brought warnings. The soldiers had found their old camp abandoned. Captain Hollis had learned the tribe had gone south. He was moving fast despite the snow. He would reach the valley within days. The rider also brought a poster. It showed a crude sketch of a boy's face. Below it, text, "Missing child, property of the mission of blessed reformation, reward for safe return," and at the bottom, "Tribe harboring this child will be considered hostile." The elder looked at Timer. "Your son has honor." Timer's hand rested on Flint's shoulder. He learned it from his people. The elder nodded slowly. "Then we have time to decide. For now, we double the watch, and we send word to the other bands. Let them know what is happening. If the mission brings soldiers, we will need allies." He looked back at Flint. "And you, boy, you will train harder, because if they come again, you will need to be able to fight. Not just survive, fight. Can you do that?" Flint thought about the White Room, about Father Grimm's smile, about the other children who were still there, still being carved and erased. He thought about his mother, whose face he could not remember, but whose death he now knew was real. And he thought about the rage that had been building in his chest since the day Timer had pulled him from the snow. "Yes," he said, "I can fight." That night Flint did not sleep. He sat by the fire in Timer's lodge and stared at the flames while his mind raced. Mother, dead. Papers signed. Mission of blessed reformation. The fragments were coming together, but they still did not form a complete picture. He could remember pieces now. A woman's voice singing. The smell of bread baking. A small house with yellow curtains. But when he tried to see her face, it was just a blur. Like someone had taken an eraser to that part of his memory and scrubbed until nothing remained. Timer sat across from him, cleaning his rifle in silence. Finally he spoke. "You are thinking too hard." Flint looked up. "How do you stop thinking about something?" "You do not. You just think about something else. Something you can control." Flint frowned. "Like what?" "Like who you want to become. The past is broken pieces. You can pick them up and try to put them back together. But even if you succeed, the cracks will still show. Or you can use those pieces to build something new, something stronger." Flint absorbed that. "What if I need to remember, to know what happened?" "Then you will, when you are ready. But do not let the search for yesterday keep you from becoming who you need to be tomorrow." Flint was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked, "What do you think happened to my mother?" Timer set down the rifle. "I think she was desperate. I think she was sick or poor or afraid. And I think men like Father Grimm prey on desperate people. They offer salvation. They offer to take the burden off your shoulders. They make it sound like mercy. And by the time you realize what you have given away, it is too late." "Do you think she wanted to get rid of me?" "No," Timer said firmly. "I think she thought she was saving you. And I think when she realized her mistake, she tried to get you back. And I think they killed her for it." Flint's hands clenched into fists. "How do you know? I do not. But I know men like them, and I know what they do to people who threaten their work." Flint stared into the fire. The flames twisted and danced, casting shadows that looked almost alive. He thought about vengeance, about riding to the mission and burning it to the ground the way they had tried to burn the camp, about making Father Grimm kneel and beg the way he had made children kneel, about carving purification into his flesh and asking how it felt. The thoughts were dark and seductive, and they filled him with a heat that had nothing to do with the fire. Timer seemed to sense the direction of his mind because he spoke again. "Revenge is a poison. It feels good going down, but it eats you from the inside." Flint looked at him. "So I just let them go. Let them keep doing what they do." "I did not say that. But if you go after them now, with rage in your heart and tears in your eyes, you will fail. And you will die, and they will win." Timer leaned forward. "If you want justice, you have to be cold. You have to be patient. You have to be smarter and harder and more ruthless than they are, and that takes time. So you train, you learn, you become the weapon that can actually hurt them. And when you are ready, when you are sharp enough and strong enough, then you strike. Not before. Flint nodded slowly. He understood. The rage was still there, burning in his chest like a coal. But Timer was right. Fire without control just burned everything, including yourself. He needed to be more than angry. He needed to be dangerous. And that meant work. Hard, patient, brutal work. He met Timer's eyes. Teach me everything. Everything you know. How to track. How to fight. How to kill if I have to. Teach me how to be the thing they should have feared. Timer held his gaze for a long moment. Then he nodded. I will. But understand this. Once you start down that path, there is no going back. You will not be a child anymore. You will be a warrior. And warriors carry weight that never leaves. Are you ready for that? Flint did not hesitate. Yes. Then tomorrow, Timer said, your real education begins. The training changed everything. Timer woke Flint 2 hours before dawn, and they moved into the forest while the rest of the camp still slept. No longer was it about learning to walk or balance or see. This was about becoming efficient, about turning the body into something that could hurt without hesitation. Timer started with hand-to-hand combat, teaching Flint how to fight with missing fingers and damaged feet, how to use elbows like hammers, how to turn disadvantage into surprise. A man expects you to punch with a closed fist, Timer explained, while demonstrating a strike. When you cannot make a proper fist, you drive the heel of your palm into his nose, or you rake what fingers you have across his eyes. There is no honor in survival, only results. Flint practiced until his arms felt like dead weight, until sweat froze on his face, until the movements became automatic, but combat training was only part of it. Timer also taught him how to disappear, how to move through a forest in daylight and leave no trace, how to control your breathing so your breath did not fog in cold air, how to use terrain, shadow, and misdirection to become invisible even when people were looking directly at you. After 3 weeks, Flint could find Timer's hiding spots in under 20 minutes. The warrior nodded approval and said nothing. The next day, he made it harder. Winter deepened. The tribe moved through the season with grim efficiency. They rationed food carefully, repaired clothing constantly, kept fires burning low to conserve wood. Flint threw himself into the work of survival alongside everyone else. He hauled water from the creek even when the buckets made his damaged hands scream. He chopped kindling even when his arms shook with exhaustion. The other tribe members noticed. They stopped looking at him like he was an outsider, started including him in conversations without translating everything to English. He was becoming Yakama, not just in name, but in fact. 6 weeks after the confrontation with the mission men, a trader came through the territory. He brought news. The Mission of Blessed Reformation had filed formal complaints with the governor. They claimed the Yakama were harboring a kidnapped child. The governor had dispatched a cavalry unit to investigate. 20 soldiers, led by a captain named Hollis, who had a reputation for efficiency and brutality. They were expected to arrive within 2 weeks. The elders called a council. When they emerged, the thin elder with black stone eyes approached Flint directly. The tribe has decided. We will not give you to the soldiers, but we also will not fight them. Not yet. Instead, we will move. Find new winter ground deeper in the mountains where they cannot follow easily. This will be hard. Some may not survive the journey, but it is better than war. Flint felt his throat tighten. You are leaving because of me. We are leaving because staying means choosing between surrender and slaughter. Neither is acceptable. The elder put a hand on his shoulder. Do not carry guilt for the choices of evil men. They began preparations immediately. They worked through the night, dismantling lodges, bundling supplies, preparing the horses for the journey ahead. By dawn, they were ready. 63 people, 11 horses, and everything they owned reduced to bundles and baskets. They moved south, following game trails and frozen rivers deeper into the Cascade Range. The terrain was brutal, steep climbs that left everyone gasping, narrow passes where one wrong step meant a fall that would kill. On the third day, they reached a valley Timer knew. It was sheltered on 3 sides by cliffs, with only one narrow entrance that could be easily defended. The tribe set up camp quickly. By nightfall they had fire and shelter. They had bought themselves time. Flint continued his training, but now it had urgency. Taima taught him how to shoot, first with the pistol at close range, then with a rifle at distance. Flint's damaged hands made it difficult, but Taima showed him modifications, how to brace the stock differently, how to compensate through positioning and patience. Flint fired hundreds of rounds over 2 weeks. At 50 yards, he could hit a target the size of a man's chest 4 times out of 5. Not great, but enough to be dangerous. 3 weeks after they arrived, a rider came from another Yakama band. He brought warnings. The soldiers had found their old camp abandoned. Captain Hollis had learned the tribe had gone south. He was moving fast despite the snow. He would reach the valley within days. The rider also brought a poster. It showed a crude sketch of a boy's face. Below it, text, "Missing child, property of the mission of blessed reformation, reward for safe return," and at the bottom, "Tribe harboring this child will be considered hostile." The tribe spent the next 2 days preparing for war. The warriors gathered every weapon they owned. They checked ammunition, sharpened blades, made more arrows. The children were taken to a cave system deeper in the valley and told to hide there, no matter what they heard. Flint wanted to go with them, but Taima refused. "You run now and they will chase you forever. You stand now and you show them that taking you costs more than it is worth. This is about making evil men afraid to do evil things." The soldiers arrived on the afternoon of the 3rd day, 10 men on horseback moving in formation. They stopped at the valley entrance, and one rode forward alone. He was young for a captain, maybe 30, with a sharp face and eyes that missed nothing. His voice carried clearly. "I am Captain Hollis of the United States Cavalry. You are harboring a child that belongs to the mission of blessed reformation. Surrender him and we leave peacefully. Refuse and I will take him by force." Taima stepped forward. "I am Taima Thundervoice. The child you speak of came to us dying. We saved him. He is ours now. By our law, he is my son. By your law, he is stolen property. Your law is wrong." Hollis smiled coldly. "I do not make the laws. I enforce them. The mission has papers, legal documents. The child was placed in their care by his mother. He ran. They want him back." "He is not going back," Taima said. "Then you are interfering with federal authorities. That makes you criminals." Hollis raised his hand and his men spread out, weapons ready. "Last chance. Give me the boy or I arrest all of you." Flint stepped out from behind Taima before anyone could stop him. He walked forward until he was standing between the 2 groups. "Look at me. Look at my hands, my feet, the scars on my body. The mission did not care for me. They tortured me. They erased my memory. They carved their purification into my flesh. I ran because staying meant dying. If you take me back, you are not enforcing law. You are enforcing murder." Hollis studied him for a long moment. Then he shrugged. "Not my concern. You are a child. Children do not decide where they live. The mission has legal custody. That is all that matters. Now come here or I will drag you." "No," Flint said. The word hung in the air like a gunshot. Hollis's expression hardened. "Boy, you do not have a choice." "Yes, I do. Everyone always has a choice. You can choose to do what is right instead of what is ordered. You can choose to see me as a person instead of property. But you are choosing this, choosing to drag a child back to the people who broke him. So when you sleep tonight, remember that. Remember you had a choice and you chose wrong." For a moment something flickered across Hollis's face. Doubt maybe, or shame. But then it was gone. He turned to his men. "Take him!" 3 soldiers dismounted and started forward. Taima raised his rifle. The other warriors did the same. Hollis's men brought their weapons up. Everyone stood on the edge of violence, and then a voice cut through the tension. "Wait!" Everyone turned. The thin elder walked forward slowly, his hands visible and empty. "Captain, you say you are here to enforce the law. Then you must also follow it. The law says a child can testify about his treatment, that accusations of abuse must be investigated. If you take this boy without investigating his claims, you are complicit in whatever happens to him next." Hollis hesitated. The elder pressed. "Take the boy's testimony officially. Write down what he says. Send it to your superiors. Let them decide. If they order you to return him anyway, we will not stop you. But at least then the truth will be recorded." Hollis looked at Flint, at Timer, at the warriors with rifles raised. Finally he spoke. "Lower your weapons." His men obeyed reluctantly. The Yakama did the same. Hollis dismounted and pulled a notebook from his coat. He walked to Flint and crouched so they were at eye level. "Tell me everything. And do not lie." So Flint told him everything he could remember. The White Room, Father Grimm, the electrodes, the carvings, the tank, the other children, his escape through fire and snow. Hollis wrote it all down, his face carefully neutral. When Flint finished, the captain stood and read back his notes. "Is this accurate?" "Yes. And you swear it is the truth?" "I swear." Hollis closed the notebook. "Then I will send this to my commanding officer. But understand something. This does not mean you are free. It means the matter is under review. If they order me to retrieve you, I will. And next time I will bring more men." He mounted his horse and looked at Timer. "Keep him safe. Because if he disappears, I will assume you killed him to avoid turning him over. And I will come back with enough soldiers to burn this entire valley." The soldiers left. The tribe exhaled. But no one celebrated. They had one time, nothing more. Flint stood in the snow, shaking from more than cold. Timer put a hand on his shoulder. "You did well. You gave them truth. Sometimes that is the strongest weapon." Flint looked up at him. "Do you think it will matter? Will they care about what was done to me?" Timer was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Captain Hollis will do what he believes is right. We just have to hope that what is right and what is ordered become the same thing. And if they do not, then we prepare for war. And this time," Flint said quietly, "I will be ready." The response came 5 weeks later, delivered by the same trader who had brought the first warning. Captain Hollis had forwarded Flint's testimony to his superiors, along with his own observations. The territorial governor had reviewed the case and consulted with federal authorities. His decision was unambiguous. The mission's legal custody remained valid. Flint was to be returned immediately. Any resistance would be met with overwhelming force. The governor had authorized Hollis to bring whatever men and resources necessary to complete the task. The mission had powerful friends in Washington, people who believed their work was holy and necessary. One tortured child's testimony meant nothing against that kind of institutional weight. Timer read the official letter 3 times before handing it to the elders. His face revealed nothing, but Flint knew him well enough now to read the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw worked silently. The thin elder looked at the letter and then at Flint. "You have a choice to make, boy. You can go with them and hope that your testimony plants seeds that grow into change someday. Or you can run, and we run with you until there is nowhere left to run. Or you can fight. Not just us fighting for you, but you fighting alongside us. Each path leads somewhere dark, but only you can choose which darkness you can live with." Flint did not hesitate. "I fight." The elder nodded slowly. "Then we all fight. And when the blood is spilled, it will be on the governor's hands, not ours." The tribe began preparing for war in earnest. They had 2 weeks before Hollis would return with reinforcements. 2 weeks to turn the valley into a fortress or abandon it entirely. The warriors voted to stay. Running had brought them nothing but exhaustion. Here they had terrain advantage. Here they could make the soldiers pay for every inch. They set traps along every approach route, deadfalls that would crush horses, covered pits lined with sharpened stakes, tripwires connected to logs that would swing down like clubs. They built barriers from fallen trees, creating choke points where superior numbers meant nothing. They stockpiled ammunition and arrows. They designated fallback positions and escape routes. And they drilled. Every warrior practiced the plan until they could execute it blind. Flint trained harder than anyone. Timer woke him before dawn and worked him until he collapsed. Then the warrior would drag him to his feet and they would start again, shooting, fighting, moving, thinking. Flint absorbed it all with desperate intensity. He knew what was coming, knew that when it arrived, hesitation would mean death. Not just his death, but the deaths of people who had chosen to protect him. That weight sat on his chest like a stone, but he did not let it crush him. Instead, he let it fuel him. Every missed shot became motivation to hit the next 5. Every stumble became reason to practice balance until his feet bled. He was becoming something the mission had not anticipated, a weapon forged in the fire they had lit. On the 8th day of preparation, something inside Flint shifted. He was practicing knife work with timer when a memory hit him like a physical blow. Not a fragment this time, a complete scene. He was smaller, maybe 5 years old, sitting at a wooden table in a small house. A woman with dark hair braided down her back was kneading bread dough, her hands moving with practiced rhythm. She was humming something. A hymn, maybe. Flint could not place it. But her face. He could see her face now. Narrow chin, green eyes. A scar above her left eyebrow. His mother. The memory continued. A man entering the house. Not his father. Someone else. Wearing a black coat with a silver cross on the lapel. The man spoke softly, but his words were knives. Your husband is dead, Mrs. Webb. Debts do not die with the debtor. You owe the company store $300. You have no way to pay, but I can offer you a solution. The mission takes in children, teaches them, feeds them, gives them purpose. And in exchange, we forgive your debt. Flint watched his mother's face crumble, watched her shake her head, watched the man in the black coat smile without warmth. It is not a request. The debt will be collected one way or another. Would you prefer to lose your home and your son, or just send him where he will be cared for while you work to rebuild your life? I will pay it back, his mother said. I will work. I will find a way. You have 30 days, and if you cannot pay, then the boy comes with me. 30 days. The memory ended. Flint stood in the snow, breathing hard, the knife forgotten in his hand. Timer was watching him carefully. What did you remember? Flint told him. When he finished, the warrior was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, they did not erase you to save your soul. They erased you to hide what they are, a business, trading in children and calling it salvation. And your mother, do you remember what happened to her? No, but I think she tried to stop them. I think she went to the mission to take me back. And I think they killed her for it. That night Flint could not sleep. He lay in the lodge, staring at the smoke hole, and thought about his mother, about the choice she had been given, about how she had been backed into a corner by men who smiled while they destroyed lives, about how she had fought anyway and died for it. He thought about the other children at the mission, the ones still there, the ones who had no warrior to pull them from the snow, the ones who were being erased right now while he was safe and warm. Rage and guilt warred inside him until he thought he would scream. Instead, he got up and walked outside. The night was cold and clear. Stars filled the sky like shattered glass. Timer was sitting by the watchfire, his rifle across his lap. He did not look up when Flint sat beside him. Cannot sleep, no, thinking about your mother. And the others, the ones still at the mission. Timer nodded. I know what you are thinking, that fighting the soldiers does not solve the real problem. That even if we win here, the mission continues. That children will keep being taken and erased and buried. Yes, you are right, Timer said. Winning here is not enough, but it is a start. Because when this is over, when the smoke clears and the bodies are counted, people will ask why. They will ask what was worth this much blood, and your story will be part of that answer. Every story that gets told chips away at the lie. Every person who sees what was done to you plants doubt about what else the mission claims. Change is not one battle. It is 1,000 small cuts until the beast bleeds out. Flint absorbed that, so we fight here to create the story. And the story creates the change, eventually, if we are lucky. If enough people care. Timer looked at him. That is all any warrior can do. Fight the battle in front of you. Trust that others will fight the ones beyond. Flint nodded slowly. Then let us make this a story worth telling. The soldiers came on the 13th day. Not 10 this time, 40. 4 full platoons moving in formation with supply wagons and a mountain howitzer that could reduce the valley entrance to rubble. Captain Hollis led them, his face grim but determined. They made camp just outside rifle range and spent the afternoon setting up defensive positions. They were not rushing in. They were preparing to lay siege, to starve the tribe out or blast them out, whichever came first. That night, Hollis sent a messenger under a white flag. A young private who looked terrified to be walking alone toward a camp full of people his government had labeled hostile. Timer met him at the valley entrance. The boy handed over a sealed letter and retreated quickly. The letter was brief. To the Yakama tribe and the individual known as Timer Thundervoice. You are ordered to surrender the child currently in your custody within 24 hours. Failure to comply will result in military action. I have 40 men, artillery, and authorization to use whatever force is necessary. You cannot win this fight. Do not let pride kill your people. Captain Samuel Hollis. Timer read it once and handed it to the elders. The thin elder looked at it, and then at the warriors gathered around the fire. Do we have any chance of winning? Timer was honest. No. If they use the artillery, they will destroy the entrance and pin us in the valley. Then they will wait until we run out of food or water. If we try to break out, they will cut us down in the open. We can make them bleed. We can make them pay, but we cannot win. Silence fell over the group. Then one of the younger warriors spoke. So we surrender the boy, save the tribe, live to fight another day. Before anyone could respond, Flint stood. His voice was steady despite the fear coursing through him. I will not let you die for me. If surrendering me saves the tribe, then that is what we do. Timer turned to him sharply. No, we do not give up our own, ever. That is not our way. Then what is? Flint asked. Because right now it looks like our way gets everyone killed. Timer's expression was hard. Our way is standing for what is right, even when it costs everything. Our way is making evil men bleed for their evil. Our way is fighting so that the next generation does not have to. And sometimes, yes, that means we die. But we die as warriors. Not as cowards who handed over a child to be tortured because the alternative was hard. The thin elder raised his hand. Enough, this is not a decision for warriors alone. This affects everyone. We will call a full council. Everyone speaks. Everyone votes. Then we decide together. The council lasted through the night. Every adult had their say. Some argued for surrender, pointing out that losing one child was better than losing the entire tribe. Others argued for negotiation, suggesting they offered to move so far away the soldiers could never find them again. But most argued for resistance, not because they thought they could win, but because surrendering Flint meant accepting that children were property to be traded when convenient. It meant accepting that power could do whatever it wanted as long as it filled out the right paperwork. It meant bowing to a system that saw them as obstacles to be removed or problems to be solved. And that, they argued, was a death worse than the one the soldiers offered. When the sun rose, the vote was taken, 47-16. They would fight. Flint felt the weight of that decision like chains. 47 people had just voted to risk death for him. 16 had voted to live, and all of them, every single one, would face the consequences of the majority's choice. He wanted to run, wanted to throw himself on the soldiers' mercy and beg them to leave the tribe alone. But he knew it would not work. The soldiers had orders. They would take him regardless, and running would dishonor the choice the tribe had made. So instead he prepared. He checked his weapons, said his goodbyes to the children being hidden in the caves, thanked the women who had taught him to sew, embraced the warriors who had trained alongside him. And when Timer came to him that final night before battle, Flint looked him in the eye and said the words that needed saying. Thank you for everything, for pulling me from the snow, for teaching me to stand, for giving me a name worth carrying. If I die tomorrow, I die as your son, and that is more than I ever thought I would have. Timer's response was quiet but fierce. You are not going to die tomorrow. None of us are, because we are not going to give them a clean fight. We are going to make it ugly and brutal and terrifying. We are going to hit them when they do not expect it. We are going to take their certainty and turn it into fear. And when it is over, whether we win or lose, they will remember us. They will remember that the Yakama do not surrender, that we do not trade our children for convenience, and that anyone who tries to take from us pays in blood. Flint felt something ignite in his chest. Not fear anymore, not even rage. Something colder and harder. Resolve, tomorrow they would fight. And whatever came after, at least they would fight standing. They struck before dawn, when the soldiers were still wrapped in sleep and certainty. Timer led 12 warriors through terrain the cavalry had deemed impassable, circling wide around the camp's perimeter. Flint moved with them, his heart hammering, but his hands steady on the rifle Timer had given him. This was not the plan the elders had approved. The plan had been defensive, but Timer had told him the truth. Defensive plans are how you die slowly. If we are going to bleed, we make them bleed first. We take their certainty and turn it into fear. They reached the supply wagons just as the first grey light touched the eastern sky. 2 sentries stood watch, but they were cold and bored. Timer moved like smoke behind the first one, his knife finding the man's throat before he could make a sound. Another warrior took the second sentry the same way. Then they were among the wagons, working fast. They slashed open grain bags, punctured water barrels, carried off ammunition and buried the rest under snow. And then they found the howitzer. Timer packed kindling soaked in pitch around the gun's carriage and struck a match. The fire caught fast. Within seconds, the artillery position was engulfed. The flames found the powder charges, and the night exploded into chaos. Timer hauled Flint up and they ran. Behind them, the camp erupted into shouting and confusion. But the Yakama warriors were already gone. The hit-and-run attacks continued for 3 days. The Yakama struck from ambush, killed sentries, stole horses, burned supplies. The soldiers grew exhausted trying to defend against enemies they could not see. By the 3rd night, Captain Hollis had lost 9 men and half his supplies. His soldiers were jumping at shadows, so he made a decision. On the 4th morning, Hollis sent a messenger. "I want to speak with the boy, face to face, no weapons. If he agrees to come with me willingly after hearing what I have to say, you let him go. If he refuses, I withdraw. You have my word." Flint made the decision himself. "I will go," so they agreed. Flint would meet Hollis at noon in the clearing between the 2 camps. Flint walked out alone. Hollis was waiting beside a small fire. When the boy was close enough, Hollis gestured to a log. "Sit, we need to talk." Flint sat, but kept his weight ready to move. Hollis pulled out a folder. "After I sent your testimony to my superiors, I did something I was not supposed to do. I sent a copy to a journalist friend in San Francisco. He started asking questions, following the money, and he found things." Hollis laid out documents. "The mission is not a charity, it is a business. They take children from desperate families and lease them out as labor to mining companies, lumber operations, farms. Your mother's name is in here, the debt she owed, the contract she was forced to sign." Hollis continued. "Your mother tried to get you back. She worked for 8 months and went to the mission to pay off the debt. They told her it had grown. When she threatened to go to the authorities, they had her arrested. She died in jail 2 weeks later. Official cause was fever, but a witness said she was beaten, that she kept screaming about her son until she could not scream anymore." Flint could not breathe. The rage in him exploded into something vast and shapeless. Hollis watched him carefully. "That journalist is publishing his findings in 3 days. The mission is about to be exposed. Federal investigators are already assigned. In a week, maybe 2, the mission will be raided and shut down. The children will be freed. Justice is coming." Hollis leaned forward. "But I can give you a choice. Come with me now. Testify in person when the trial starts. Be the face of this story. Help make sure every person involved hangs. Or stay here and let the story happen without you." Flint looked at the papers, at his mother's signature on a contract she could barely read, at the profit margins calculated in the bodies of the forgotten. "If I go with you, what happens to the tribe?" "Nothing. My orders were to retrieve you. Once I have you, I withdraw. But if you stay and I report failure, my superiors will send more men, enough to crush this valley and everyone in it." Flint understood the choice. His freedom or their safety. He thought about Timer, who had given up his hunt, about the tribe that had voted to risk everything, about his mother who had died screaming his name. He thought about the other children still at the mission, still being carved and erased, and he realized justice was coming through newspapers and courts. But the children needed someone to act now. I will go with you, on one condition. You take me to the mission first, before the raid. I want the children to see that someone escaped, that they are not forgotten." Hollis shook his head. "That is too dangerous. If Father Grimm recognizes you, they will scatter, destroy evidence." "Good," Flint said. "Let them run, but those children need to know hope exists." Hollis was quiet. Then he said, "You are either the bravest kid I've ever met or the most foolish. But I will make it happen. 1 hour. Then we leave and you testify." Flint stood and offered his hand. "Deal." Hollis shook it. Flint raised his hands toward the soldiers emerging from the tree line. "It is over. I am surrendering." Behind him, hidden in the forest, Timer watched through a spyglass. Beside him, the thin elder spoke quietly. "He made his choice. We honor it. The ride to the mission took 2 days. When they arrived, Flint felt his stomach turn. The building was exactly as he remembered. White walls, high fences. Father Grimm was waiting at the entrance, his silver cross gleaming. He smiled when he saw Flint. "Welcome home, child. We have been so worried." Flint looked at him with cold clarity. "You do not recognize me." "Should I? I was 47. You carved me. You erased me. You told me I would thank you someday." The color drained from Grimm's face. "That is impossible. 47 died. No one survives that." "I did, and I remembered, and I brought witnesses." Hollis stepped forward with soldiers behind him. "Father Grimm, you are under arrest for fraud, kidnapping, forced labor, and murder. The mission is being seized. Any resistance will be met with immediate force." The soldiers moved through the building, rounding up staff, securing records, freeing children. Flint walked the halls one last time with his head high. He found the White Room, found the table where they had strapped him down, and he found the children, 23 of them, gathered in the dormitory, confused and terrified. Flint stood before them and spoke. "My name is Flint. I used to be 47. They tried to erase me, but I survived. I escaped. I found people who protected me. And now I am here to tell you that you are too. You are not property. You are not sins that need burning out. You are children. And starting today, you are free." One girl raised her hand. "Where do we go?" "I do not know. But anywhere is better than here. And there are people out there who will fight for you. You just have to hold on." "What was your real name?" she asked. "My name was Thomas Brennan, but I am Flint now. And I am Yakama, and I survived. So can you?" 3 months later, Flint stood in a courtroom in the territorial capital. He testified for 6 hours, told his story, showed his scars, named names. The jury deliberated for 40 minutes. Father Grimm and 3 staff were sentenced to hang. 5 others received prison terms. The mission of Blessed Reformation was dissolved. The children were placed with families or in legitimate orphanages. It was not perfect justice, but it was something. It was a message after the trial. Hollis found him. "So what now? You can go anywhere." Flint already knew. "I am going home, to the valley, to my people." Hollis handed him a package. "Testimony from other missions. They heard your story. They want to tell theirs. Someone has to listen." Flint took it. "I will." Hollis extended his hand. "You are a hell of a kid." Flint shook it. "I am Yakama. That is the only name that matters." He returned to the valley in early spring. Timer met him at the entrance. "You came back. I told you I would, but you were free." "This is home," Flint said. Timer's expression broke into something like a smile. "Then welcome home, son." That night around the fire, Flint told the tribe everything. About the trial, about the mission falling, about the children being freed, about his mother's name finally being honored. When he finished, the thin elder stood. "You have changed the world, not with a rifle, but with truth. That is the hardest weapon to wield." The elder placed a hand on Flint's head. "From this day forward, you will be known as Flint Twice Born. Once from your mother, once from the snow. Both times you survived what should have killed you." The tribe spoke in unison. Flint Twice Born. Years later, when Flint had become a man, he would return to that valley with stories of other missions exposed, other children freed, other battles fought with testimony instead of bullets. He would train others to speak when silence was easier, to remember when forgetting was safer. And on quiet nights, when the fire burned low, he would think about the boy who stumbled from the snow with no name. The one time a thunder voice had decided was worth more than an elk. And he would whisper a promise. I did not forget. I never forgot. And because I remembered, others will too. The fire you lit burns forever. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.